Welcome to the Connection Central Industry Podcast, where real conversations meet real strategies. Each episode we dive into the industries that keep Australia moving, talking with the leaders, innovators, and everyday operators, shaping what's next. So settle in, turn it up, and let's get into it.
Everybody, Michelle O'Hara here from Connection Central for another industry podcast. Very lucky today to have Catherine Craig from Aarcana with us. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, Catherine, what I love about your business, and you're going to tell us a little bit about it, but I want to focus on the fact that, you have niched your strategic HR, payroll, and compliance business into the community services sector, which is a bold move. And so I'd love for you to tell us a bit about yourself, how you got here, and why you decided to go down that route.
A great question. I think, for a lot of individuals and professionals, the pandemic made us all sort of pivot and twist and turn and go into all sorts of different various areas that we potentially wouldn't have been part of in any other sense of the word. But I was busily studying my master's degree when COVID kind of peaked really and the world shut down and really shifted. And so I decided I was studying strategic HRM and I found myself landing in community services, sort of helping smaller disability organisations with their HR framework. And it kind of grew from there. And I think now helping these organisations navigate complex payroll and compliance challenges is really our sweet spot, and it's what we do really, really well. So with my background in aviation, I think it's really influenced how I approach risk. So for me, it's about getting it right up front, not fixing it later. So being quite proactive in how we support organisations.
So obviously with a lot of reforms that are going on in the space, how are you finding that clients are adapting to it? Are they finding it really difficult and therefore obviously really need your services to guide them?
Well, I think yes. And I think quite simply, people don't know what they don't know. And it's such an overwhelming and under-supported sector. It's heavily regulated. So for us, it became this commercial decision, yes, to really go in there and support them because, as I said, people don't know what they don't know, and they're doing their absolute best to work with those most vulnerable in our community to give them the very best of care, but to run a business as well. And obviously, with all of these regulations, they need to have that support of someone that's an organisation and a team that is focused on expertise in this area. And some of those modern award instruments, let me tell you, some sadists put those together. And it's really, it's just about making sure that they've got the support and they know and they can feel calm and refreshed that they're able to rest in the fact that they're compliant. They've got somebody looking after them that has their back. So I think I've kind of segued off a little bit from what you originally asked me, but it's a landscape that is 100% confusing and you must be on your game with it.
And I think it's fantastic that you have the strategic HR piece because with that comes sort of the change management, which is fantastic. When you go into an organization, I guess, share with our audience, what's that first step? So they can understand at what stage they would need to call you in. And then when you do go in there, what's the first thing your team does that starts the whole process?
Great question. So it can change. It depends on what area within the industry that we're working with. Now, we work across disability, aged care and not-for-profit. So it really just depends. But generally, it will start with us having a pretty good look under the hood with their payroll compliance. I guess the trickiest and can cause the most amount of problems with Fair Work. I mean, we've been dealing with some organisations now and it could be a change in leadership team. So they've decided to refresh and just audit everything to see where they are. And we found some very nasty surprises that have meant that they've needed to make voluntary notices to the Fair Work Ombudsman just to get in front of it. So these things are quite serious. once we've had that look under the hood, and this is generally where we start, in some kind of compliance audit, then we can see where their pain points are. Generally, I have a 6-word motto for Aarcana people and projects, and it's we enter, we fix, we exit. And that's what it's about. And then they come back to us if they need us for anything else, of course, with our recommendations. But it comes from really understanding what their pain points are and them understanding what the risk is if it's not sorted.
Fantastic. I think particularly in the current state of affairs, as people are so overwhelmed that they just want those specialists to come in and listen and diagnose and give them solutions. I think, you're in that perfect position for that. So you mentioned, and we talked about before, you've had a career like in the aviation industry. Talk a little bit more about, you mentioned risk, how that is influenced, because obviously it's very different industries.
Yes, it is, but there's really distinct synergies as well. I think my very long career in aviation taught me that, there's absolutely no room for error and systems matter. And we know that when we get on an airplane, we're 40,000 feet in the sky. We need to know that there's processes and compliance. I think what came from my career within aviation was learning discipline, structure, and accountability. But I think that's also critical to how those people are that are working within inside those systems as well. If we're looking at airplanes, for example, we need to know that we've got tech crew that know what they're doing and are compliant to the system. So I think what I've brought into Aarcana now, particularly in that payroll compliance or that work health safety compliance or that overall strategic HR compliance, is that we know when something goes wrong, it's not just numbers. For example, with payroll, it's going to be people's livelihoods, it's going to be organisational risk, it's going to be organisational reputation. So I think the synergies are and the similarities in aviation. Safety is non-negotiable. And definitely in our orbit, I see compliance the same way.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So your team, what I find interesting is your team is all remote, which, is very forward thinking. And particularly, with the fuel crisis, etc. at the moment, we sort of are heading towards lockdown again. How do you obviously have exceptional systems and processes in place, which you just talked about. Like, how do you keep the team, I guess, motivated, on track with your values, with your culture, and productivity? How do you do that? Share that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's ongoing. But I'm really lucky because we've been very careful with how we've implemented our highly experienced and amazing team members into Aarcana. So I guess we're fully remote by design, not by default.
Yes.
It gives us, again, that access to the right people, not just the closest people. And I think, excuse me, in a sector like ours, that really does matter. But you're right, it only works if there's very clear boundaries, clear expectations, clear communication and accountability. And I've tried to build the culture, particularly now as our team is growing, whereby, we have our virtual office and we morning everyone, hi, I'm just popping out for a coffee, just exactly the same as if you would be in a physical office. How was your weekend? How's the day? What are we looking at with workflow, etc.? So, we're definitely creating and cultivating that very deliberate culture within the business as well. And I think work from home's here. It's a reality now. The days of 9 to 5 in the office have changed. And I think from a productivity perspective too, it allows me to give the team flexibility. We know what our outputs are. We meet those requirements. And it's just working at the minute. I'm not saying we won't have an office one day, but right now, this is what works best for Aarcana.
It sounds wonderful. It sounds like you're very forward thinking. So the interesting thing about the strategic HR piece is the human versus the AI. Obviously, everyone is talking about AI at the moment. So I'm interested to know, you mentioned in our initial chat a sentence which was, you can't break from humanity, which I really loved. Where do you see AI sitting in and like right now and I guess in the future, and how are you guys utilizing that in your organization?
Oh yeah, it's in our organization and it's powerful. We're leaning into it. And I think, you definitely can't remove that human layer from people and culture. And I think It's like compliance. It's not just rules. HR can be interpretation. I hate to use this word, but it can be judgment, not of people, but of processes, systems, etc., to better those. And it can be contextual as well. So I think with Arcana, what we're building is that model where AI is doing the heavy lifting, but we as humans are providing the intelligence. And you're right, you can't break from humanity, especially in HR. The real risk, in my opinion, is when businesses think that AI is going to replace us thinking, and it doesn't. It only enhances it. And we know, and I do little social science tests a lot of the time with chat and whatnot, and sometimes it's completely wrong. And I think you just can't rely on AI to be able to have that human interpretation, to be able to assimilate with people's feelings, etc. It just doesn't have that capability. So while it has a place here working with us in systems and processes, it will never, ever, in my opinion, or certainly not in this very short term, replace that human interaction that is an integral part of human resources.
So true. I agree. I agree completely. I'm curious, do you find your team works across all the different states within Australia?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Been talking a lot lately to different people about the different approach of different states towards people. So, for example, New South Wales, Sydney might be a bit more transactional. Queensland is very relationship based. Victoria, I think they're just having trouble, bless them. Do you find your approach to change your approach to different states? I'm just curious.
I don't know that I'd put a blanket change on the state. I mean, I get obviously an understanding. I'm down in Sydney next week with a number of business meetings, and I'm going to obviously adapt my method to whom I'm meeting with and the business and the sector that they're in as well. I am going to be talking with people that do have interaction with community services sector, but that's not the lane that they're in at the moment themselves from a professional services perspective. So I think, look, it comes down to the individual. I'd have to honestly say for me, I can't just put a blanket, this is how we operate in New South Wales, or this is the West Australians, because, they're so far away from us and the tyranny of distance, so they're a bit different over there. I really put it down to, and I don't mean that, I was just using that as an example. We love our West Australian friends, but it's really about that individual relationship for me, and that's what works. I've been doing, I guess, relationship as part of my profession for most of it. So for many years, and I think every transaction is part of that relationship and how we're going to interact with that person to do business. So yeah, I know Sydney's more fast paced. Queensland's more laid back. The only thing that really does irritate me the most is daylight savings. So thank God next week we'll all be on the same time zone. Does my head in. But, that's my take on that. I think while we view it, I still go in on a very personal one-to-one kind of process when I'm dealing with people. That's my attitude towards it.
No, that's wonderful. Now I know most people don't love change. And gosh, how much, I feel like since COVID, we just live in a world of change. You have Simon on board in your team who is a change agent, which I think is such a great strategic move. What role does he play in the relationships and when there is a lot of change involved?
So that is an arm of the business that we're building. Part of our work health safety component does come into that change management as well, because it's very important. And again, I'll go back to just how under-supported the sector is. So having this kind of change and that change of support and transformation is really important. The reason I have deliberately made sure this is a service that's available to our clients is that we do a lot of payroll audits, compliance audits, work health safety audits as part of the facilitation of buyers that are purchasing aged care facilities or disability service provider businesses, for example. So at that transactional stage, it's really important that the buyer knows that they're not buying liability, for example. So we work with the buyers and their team, the acquisition team, to again have a look under the hood. What exactly are you buying? I often equate that to, you wouldn't buy a house without getting a pest and termite report or a building report, so you're covering your bases and reducing that risk. So the transformation side of it comes into when we're doing these initial looks under the hood, we're able to see that perhaps there can be some refinement of how the operation is actually performing. If it does need that transformation to bring it up to speed, to make it a more efficient and profitable outfit. And that really comes down to using your people in the very best way to their skills and ability. And we're able to sort of stand back and have a look at it. Often new buyers or new owners don't have that historical understanding. And certainly if there's still current staff there, they're too close. Then trying to introduce that change in that internal level can be very difficult. But when you have an external resource that's coming in and overviewing the overarching state of the nation, if you like, they can make the recommendations and facilitate that change in a way that's embraced to a point where, why didn't we do this earlier? Because here's my cost savings, here's my team engagement, here's my retainment. I've got an agile workforce and I'm pretty happy. So having someone with Simon's experience coming from a large multinational organization himself, being able to deliver the change management and that transformation is invaluable.
Absolutely. It really is a fantastic strategic piece, I feel. What do you find stops people? Because exactly what you just said is what all of the top business people that I've been interviewing have been saying, is that having that external person with the expertise come and sort of get that eagle-eye view, and then, having a plan in place, and then having someone who can keep you accountable basically to that plan to achieve things. In the end, the outcomes are just that outweigh so much, the investment. So what do you think stops people from doing that?
So many things. Look, where do you start? The people are frightened of change themselves. They know they need it. I knew I had to change my business and I knew I had to rebrand it. And I was thinking, "Oh, but everyone knows the old brand and this and I had this concern, but I thought I've got to do this, and it's paid for itself in spades. But the thing is that fear of the unknown, that non-belief in seeing that this is going to be better for you at the end. The only constant in this life is change for anyone, whether we're individually in our personal lives or our professional lives, big business. I mean, look at the world at the moment. Who would have thought in March that there'd be a war in the Middle East? It's or February. But, it just is a constant thing. Helping them understand the benefits. And yes, this is an initial investment, absolutely, but it's going to provide so much ROI. And it's demonstrating that, and it's how we explain it to the organisations themselves. But I do, Michelle, go back to risk. The risk of them not changing, the risk of them not adapting to once in a generation changes within aged care legislation, for example. You have to adapt, you have to change. So it's really about the risk and communicating that to them and the benefits.
It's a bit scary, isn't it, out there in business?
It is. It truly is. I mean, I'm sure every business owner that you have spoken to has those 2:00 in the morning moments. I know I do. And I go, oh my God, payroll. Yes, that's done. And then, then your mind starts thinking about all these other things. There's always something that's, going on in there that you have to think about. From a business owner's perspective, yeah, it is scary. And that's why aligning and partnering with the right people that have your back and know what they're doing is so important, because that gives you that extra hour of sleep and stops you having to worry about that part of it, because it's in safe hands. And that's what we're all about.
Oh, completely agree. I think that's the secret going forward for any business, is that partnering, isn't it? Because we've got so much overwhelm going on, both in our personal and business lives, to be honest. I feel like everything is sped up. That I do find that companies, owners, etc., are looking for those trusted collaboration partners who they know they can trust. That's sorted, like you were mentioning. because we can't actually physically do it all. And any companies who think they can are not going to, that's where the burnout is coming from, etc.
Yeah. I have one analogy. I've used it for a long time. It's a bit like Madonna. People don't remember her.
Are you talking my language? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, my vintage too. But right, she surrounded herself by brilliant people that made her look awesome. She wasn't doing everything. She had all those people around her that did it for her. And that's how I try and equate it with business. And with us, again, as I say, we enter, we fix, we exit. If you need us, we're on demand. I don't sign up to memberships and retainers. I don't believe in them. It's like I signed up to a gym last year. I've been twice. It's what's the point? Use me, not me, it's our team as you need us. Use Aarcana, contact us and we'll support you in and that's what it's all about. So there's value there.
Yes, and it makes you stickier, I think, doing it that way because,
Yeah,
very good.
100%.
Do you find, though, because you're working in those community service sectors, obviously they're usually very caring people. Sometimes they're not necessarily focused on profit, like you mentioned before. Do you spend quite a bit of time, I guess, connecting with them and helping them with business as well as the HR, payroll and compliance?
Well, I think a lot of it goes hand in hand, really. But once they've got that HR framework right, once they've got the payroll framework 100% correct, because there's no room at all now for any error. I just went through a recent industrial relations, all these bad things that are going to be coming towards employers in the next 12 months, and it's frightening. So, they really have to be compliant there and also work health safety. So I think, to answer your question, it's really about them seeing that value again and making sure that what we're offering them is going to be supportive of the entire business. I'm very big on, it's one of my passions, is working with organizations so that they're not siloed in their business and they understand agility within their workforce. It saves them so much money. And once you explain it to them and they get that understanding of, oh, my business is very agile because if my head of finance goes away on a holiday, I know I've got somebody to step in there in an acting position. I'm getting engagement. I'm providing continued professional development. And I'm retaining that talent. So I'm not having to rehire somebody, and I'm sort of developing within my team. So I think it does help. We certainly do help with the fundamentals of all aspects of the business being successful.
Oh, I think you have to. Tell me a bit more about that agility. So that involves what?
Well, in a nutshell, if you have, this is my analogy with it, let's say you have a general manager that has said, it's time for me to move on. I'm going to go into another role, another industry, blah, blah, blah. I'm giving you 2 months notice, whatever's in their contract at that senior level. In that time, ideally the business would have some succession planning in place anyway. And if they don't, we help with that. But it's really then identifying, we promote from within. So that next person in line, going, ideally, this is how it works in a perfect role. We'll go into that role. The person under them that was ticked for that role will go into this and so on and so on. So what you're actually recruiting for is the least expensive role at the end of the day down here. Does that make sense?
It does make good sense, yes. And not only that, I've found in the past that if you're developing from within, you've already instilled all the values and the behaviors, and it makes sense then to keep developing people up.
Yeah. I've explained it in a very brief mindset. To me, it's about getting that understanding within your business. And I will say this too, it really is about building that culture. So if we're looking at different generational cohorts, some of the younger ones kind of go, well, why would I even want to be here? I'm never going to get to that role. But if you can display that, hey, there's succession in this business and we want to keep you. We chose you. We want you as part of it. Then it makes good sense to have agility within your workforce. And I'd love to talk to anyone in your audience that would like to have more information around that, because we are cracking at implementing that in businesses.
Oh, love that. Owning the space, love it. No, I love that. So are you finding as well, Catherine, that you talked about the youngsters coming through? Mm. I mean, you've been in this game a long time. Like, have you and the team had to adapt quite a bit to, talk to the different generations, like deal with leadership, all that side of things? Has that been quite a interesting journey for you guys?
Yeah, it is. Different generational cohorts are amazing. And I think, everyone does bang on a little bit about Gen Z, Gen Z. They've got some amazing attributes and they teach us so many
So
smarter ways of
much.
doing things, right? But a lot of us get stuck in it. No, I've never done it that way before. So I just can't embrace that change, right? But I think that getting employers just to look at the very best in their generational cohort, what's in there, it's amazing. It's just amazing. So as far as leadership goes, I mean, I've always said you don't have to be a manager to be a leader, right?
Oh, I
You
like
don't have to be a manager to be a leader. And this is why you get any change manager will tell you this, and I know Simon does this when he's working with clients. He identifies a few of those people in the workforce that are going to help him champion that change through their peers. It's a smart way of thinking, but they're the ones who identify you're a leader. Look how everyone follows you and you're not a manager. So they have the influence. And that's what we identify as well. And you'd be amazed how many business owners fail to see where their strengths are with their team. And they're just overlooking them and thinking, that manager is the one. It's like if you put an awesome, awesome salesperson into a managerial role and they fail because that's not their jam.
Yes, yes.
But this is why we have to identify skills and talent and put them into the right roles so that they're going to thrive and the business thrives.
People are the future, aren't they? And especially since aren't as many out there to select from, we must look after the good ones that we have, right? And develop them. I'm big fan of that. And I have a 19-year-olds and 14-year-olds. So I do listen because they're extremely clever humans. And I love that they question everything and,
Yeah.
come with different ideas without all our baggage.
Yeah, that's it, 100%. It's like, oh, how do I fix my phone? Click platform. I don't know how to do that. Or going on with my laptop, like right now, mine is going haywire, but I don't have anyone to help me.
You're doing good. So, Catherine, as a final piece, I guess, what advice would you give to businesses in this space? Maybe mention just 3 things that they really should look at focusing on, going forward with all the change and such that's going on in the industry.
Risk is one thing. Mitigate that within your business and get the right people in to identify where it is and fix it. Aarcana people and projects can do that. Compliance, that's really important. Make sure that you're up to speed with all of these legislative changes, and not just within, what's happening with the legislation on aged care, for example, but what's happening with fair work changes, what's happening with industrial relations changes, knowing what you can and can't do within your business now that you could do last year that you can't do next year. For example, restraint of trade or, not can't poach any of my clients. Now they can potentially from 2027. So that used to be within contracts that couldn't happen, but that's going.
How's that for a fantastic sentence to finish on? Thank you so much, Catherine. I've absolutely enjoyed every moment with you today. Thanks for joining us. Blended. Thanks.